Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, it is me, Josh Bloom, and I am freshly seated here at the P after consuming my buy one, get one sausage McMuffin, which McDonald's currently fights me about. Their standard value menu deal on this sandwich is buy one, get one for $1, and they don't understand why I would care about saving the dollar. You understand, and I thank you for that. If you want to follow me on my entire McMuffin journey, be sure to click the link to watch my latest Come With Me to See video in the show notes. It is extensive and detailed. It has been longer than usual since you last heard from me. In fact, just over a month, and that is because of the socially acceptable excuse called holiday break, which I used to gather life experiences and the resultant thoughts about them to discuss with you, but also because I have been preparing a change to the broadcast based on inspiration, but also based on the confirmation of that inspiration by listeners I trust. This podcast originally began as a semi-weekly compilation of the audio of my frequent rants on TikTok, and then those rants morphed into a weekly compilation of my daily 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration posts, and then the intro and outro that I would append to that compilation began to get longer and longer and longer, to the point that it became obvious that I should split the Josh Bloom podcast off on its own and provide the 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration audio as a separate feed. I get it. I don't like being interrupted by him either. So that's exactly what I am doing. From now on, if you want to enjoy, if it is possible to enjoy, the 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration series, you can visit me every day on YouTube, Instagram, Substack, or TikTok if you're nasty, to watch my daily video posts of the series. Go to superjews.com, that's superjews.com, to access links to all of my social media. I will also continue to post a compilation of the daily videos each week on YouTube, which also gets sent out to my Substack subscribers. If you are not subscribed to my Substack, please go to superjews.substack.com to do so. Now, if you want to continue receiving what you are already used to, or more likely obsessed with, which is an audio feed of the weekly compilation of the daily 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration posts, along with an exclusive intro and rundown of the whole week by me, really me, not some disgusting generative AI, you can still have that. As of this moment, you can now follow the podcast feed titled 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom. I am excited about that. Are you? Great. The new podcast is already available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can click the link in the show notes to follow in your preferred podcast app, where you will already be able to listen to 4 episodes encompassing days 306 through 333 with somewhat friendly intros and outros by me. That's like more than a month of days. I hope you continue to enjoy what I fully intend to be informational and inspirational, but what sometimes must feel like a document of doom for us both. I understand, and I hope you do too. This is episode number 60 of the Josh Knows He's Been Away for a relatively long time, but he's back now. And that's what really matters, because when it comes down to catching up with a man who needs to be caught up with to feel truly alive, it doesn't really matter when, where, or how the catching up happens, as long as it does, because catching up with the person that you care about is an experience when time and place melt away and connections happen that are beautiful. At least that is what Josh wants you to believe, instead of focusing on how you may have been used to hearing from Josh on a more regular basis, which you will continue to do now, especially if you begin to follow the new 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast, in addition to this podcast, also known as the Josh Bloom Podcast. This week on the show, I have an exciting, touching, yet a touch excruciating but ultimately elucidating update about the state of affairs in the world of myself and my sibling, as has been documented here on the Josh Bloom Podcast, as well as other social media platforms. Today, this is a feel-good story. Stay tuned. Also coming up, I discuss my discovery of a tiny bit cringy but still satisfyingly listenable Smiths dedicated podcast that I came to realize is hosted by a Mormon. Not that there's anything wrong with that, which leads me to some questions. Later, we get into my obsession with the two Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band live albums from my childhood and what that has to do with my father's mid-1970s acquisition of a turntable for an amount of money equal to nearly $3,000 today. Where did that money come from? I have questions. Then we wrap up this week discussing why I now hate NYC. It's not NYC's fault, it's Josh Bloom's fault, and in fact, upon reflection, I don't hate NYC. NYC hates me, and it should. I took it for granted for so long, and now it's done with me because I have become so unappreciative of its charms. Stay tuned, and I will tell the tale. Here is an update about Bloom versus Bloom, which is not a court case by any means, but simply a handy-dandy but not wholly accurate dramatic way to refer to the ongoing personal controversy regarding my brother and me. I am happy to say that I believe that neither he nor I has the energy to continue to be at war or even in a cold feud. It's just too difficult to maintain, frankly. If you are going to be at odds with someone, and the chances are likely, as proven in this case, that you will be encountering them in public on a regular basis, it makes sense on a practical level to foster a stalemate. But in this case, it is not a stalemate. I am thrilled that a stalemate is not needed. Let me go back a few days earlier. Cue some magical back-in-time music. Hi, it's Josh Bloom. I am here at the P waiting for somebody. You might be able to guess. Yes, my brother. Following up on his text apology about using the Jacob Burns Film Center gift certificate that he gave me for my birthday, which I did not find out about until over 6 months later when I went to use it myself, my brother texted me to say that he has become an avid listener of the Josh Bloom podcast and loves it. I wrote back to say that I was happy he was enjoying it, but that if we were going to continue casual conversation after he confronted me just a few weeks ago at the very table I am sitting at now, we needed to have the discussion I have been suggesting all along. He agreed. I am nervous about this and spent the last few days contemplating it while knowing at the same time that spontaneity is the advocate of honesty, but contemplation is the enemy of spontaneity. I am excited about the possibilities. I would like to have a relationship with my sibling that is supportive, communicative, and betters the both of us. I have not had a substantial conversation with my brother in 2.5 years. In situations based on misunderstanding, which are not unusual in the slightest when it comes to family, usually no one is at fault. Assigning blame does not put people on the road to accepting one another, but not being able to discuss the feelings that arise which cause us to want to assign blame will only result in the acceptance of defeat. Siblings have such long histories of rivalries because siblings are reflections of one another. Siblings are all twins, essentially, because there can be no greater mirror of a sinner. The availability of the ability to look into oneself so readily, so casually, so often is not for the faint of heart, especially if that heart is constantly feeling faint. Let's go back to the future. Hi, it's Josh. I am back in the future of the past I just described, but still actually in the past because you are listening to a podcast, dummy. Isn't this positive development between my brother and me nice? I am not a believer that drama has to automatically be negative. Positive drama is interesting to me too, and frankly, there's a lot of comedy in both, and comedy is what is most important to me. Laughing at myself is a skill that I never developed fully, and I am enjoying being put through the rigors. I feel like my brother and I have reached a place where it feels like we established a new base of understanding, and understanding is more valuable than a stalemate, as I said earlier. I don't remember many details about the conversation itself, but I do remember that the nice lady at the Panera, whom I thanked in my book, brought my brother and me some free pastries because she was so happy to see us talking. Apparently, word got out about our cold feud, and now I hope it gets out about our reconciliation. When I am in conversation, I am not with my phone. I am present, and present is a compromise when it comes to documenting ideas and thoughts in the moment. What I do have is a new memory, and even better, a new feeling. It's wild to go from feeling like, I hope I don't run into my brother, to, I hope I do run into my brother. Going through some shit with someone and then having the negative experience of the past inform a positive experience in the future is a reality that can't be replicated. You have to go through it to have gone through it. I don't feel obligated to have a relationship with my brother because he's my brother, but I feel interested in developing a relationship with him because now I imagine him as a potential friend. There is a runway now, which to me means time. But maybe a runway indicates speed. I don't have a need for speed. Maybe railway is better than runway. I feel good about a peaceful journey with some reasonable scenery. To wit, right on cue, my brother just walked into the P and startled me as I was struggling to understand why I am not funny on TikTok and what I'm going to do about that. It was out of character for me to calmly explain so easily to him why I was startled. I get startled because I am always so possessed by whatever it is I am doing that a sudden, unexpected interruption shocks my system. Explanation is not the domain of people like me who have spent a lifetime expecting others to automatically understand them without bothering to provide the information to do so. Then I would typically add the cherry on top of this ill-conceived sundae by getting frustrated and blaming the other person for not getting it. During this latest interaction with my brother, post our big conversation, the scenery remained scenic, and he and I spent some time discussing my comedic struggles. He brought up my recent rants about the broken alarm here at the P and mentioned laughing when he walked in one day and heard it for himself. I was pleased to hear this. I know I can elicit laughter. I kill it in the comments section in under 10 words and also in screeds that exceed 10,000. I accept that I might not be cut out for the short form required by TikTok, but I have had enough success to keep trying. That's how they get you. Shortly after I wrapped up with my brother, the nice woman who works at the P, who gave us free pastries, startled me in the exact same way. I texted my brother about this to let him know that he is not alone. This was also out of character for me to do, or maybe on the way to in character. I brought up the Smiths on the previous episode when I was describing my run-in with the brother, sister, girlfriend, boyfriend duo at the Black Cow Coffee Company community table, which was only a run-in for me in my mind, which makes this encounter with the low-rent suburban white stripes a major event nonetheless. The Smiths have been on my mind a lot lately. In fact, Morrissey released the first single from his first solo album in 6 years today, titled Makeup Is a Lie, which feels like a Morrissey song title, but a late career one, which is to say, not as innovative or inspired. I commented on socials, "It's certainly no Cemetery Gates, it's not even Suedehead." But I did enjoy Makeup Is a Lie more after I began imagining it as Andy Warhol's debut solo single. I have a second TikTok account now where I post non-political content, similar to how I have split this podcast. I posted a video with the same comment about Makeup Is a Lie there, and that video has around 8,000 views, which reminds me that opinions about Morrissey draw out more opinions about Morrissey. I also felt good about this, considering what feels to me like considerable comedic struggles. Listen to Makeup Is a Lie for yourself, and let me know what you think. The new TikTok account can be found at I am Josh Bloom. Speaking of the Smiths, I have been actively wondering if the Smiths have surpassed the Beatles as my favorite band, and in thinking about this, I went so far as to see if there is a Smiths dedicated podcast. I found one, and only one, which should serve as an indicator of the size of the Beatles fan base. A band that has dozens of dedicated podcasts, many of them quite good and many of them quite not good. In fact, the host of this podcast about the Smiths mentions that he believes it is the only podcast about the Smiths. I concur. This Smiths podcast, called Smiths Cyclopedia, seems to have stopped publishing in early 2025, but I have a couple of dozen episodes to enjoy. It is hosted by a 20-something Mormon, and I only point out the Mormon part because of my fictional and unfounded skepticism regarding Mormons. But really, I am pointing it out because I was intrigued that a religion controversial enough to be the basis of parody by the South Park guys for almost 15 years running on Broadway embraces the sound of the Smiths, a controversial band that sings about ambiguous sexuality, depression, and death. I commented about this in a pithy way online saying, "Until moments ago, I didn't know that Mormons are into the Smiths. Mormon-see?" I received some interesting replies from Mormons, including this one, which confirmed my surprise. In Utah in the 80s, those who listened to the Smiths caught a lot of flack from the broader culture. By the way, if you have never seen the Book of Mormon, I remember finding it so profoundly blasphemous that I was worried the theater would be struck by lightning. In other words, I enjoyed it. So I began listening to this Smiths Cyclopedia podcast. It's amateurish, but charming, man. Pun intended. I was drawn in right away when the host explained that it was the song Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now that got him into the band, which is the same for me. I remember my mother used to be perpetually perplexed by the lyric, "I was looking for a job and then I found a job." I get it. It only really makes sense if you are obsessed with the Smiths. Cut to a generation later, and the host of the Smith Cyclopedia show is having his dad on as a guest during the second episode because his father is the one who turned him on to the band in the first place. They reminded me that I had completely forgotten about the Smiths' live album, Rank, which further reminded me that I really don't care about live albums because I am so fascinated with production that production is woven into the artistic value of songs for me. If you are a Beatles fan, as I am, but maybe not as much as before, a great way to understand what I mean by this is to look up how Strawberry Fields Forever progressed from a John Lennon demo to the groundbreaking final product it became. This is production, and is why the band's producer, George Martin, is the man most referred to as the fifth Beatle. So I continued listening to this Smith Cyclopedia podcast, and I found it funny how any time a reference was made to anything ambiguously or clearly sexual in the band's music or visuals, which is fairly often when it comes to the Smiths, I sensed an air of subtle embarrassment. Remember, this host is in his mid-20s, so this felt a little unusual to me. Today, for instance, in the episode I listened to about the Smiths' first single, Hand in Glove, the cover art, which I had never seen before but have now, came up. The host's thoughts about the naked man's body on the sleeve didn't sound like there was shame in his game necessarily, but more like I am talking about something naughty. I admit that I am likely feeding my own preconceived notions about Mormonism and religion in general, but that's what I do here on the Josh Bloom podcast. I make admissions. I have included the artwork in question and have linked to the entire Threads conversation with Mormons in my Substack post for this episode of the Josh Bloom podcast. Please subscribe to have future posts emailed to you every time a new episode goes live. If you don't, you will miss out on the extra goodies planted there, which serve as context for everything I am talking about here. I also include a piece of collage art to accompany each episode that provides insight into where my mind wanders throughout the time between shows. I post pithy thoughts and attempt humorous cultural observations on my social media and often illustrate them with short videos as well. I like to plug the images of the cultural figures I reference into these collages. I have been doing this for the 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration series all along as well. Really, I have been doing this all my life. I don't want you to miss out, and I also want you to interrupt your workday, so please subscribe at superjews.substack.com. It's free if you are a cheap bastard or a cheap bitch, but if you are inclined to subscribe at the $5 a month level, even after being called names just now, I would be grateful for your support. Speaking of hearing songs in a live setting, as I just mentioned regarding the Smiths' live album Rank, live recordings don't interest me much unless the live performance is so passionate that it exists as wholly separate from the studio recording as a relevant work unto itself. This may seem like a big leap away from the Smiths, but two live albums that meet this standard for me are by Detroit's Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. Live Bullet, released in 1976, and Nine Tonight, released in 1981, are, to steal the word used by Google's evil by default AI overview, electrifying. In fact, I probably have never even heard most of the studio versions of the songs on these albums because I never felt the need to seek them out. How does this relate to two topics typically covered here on the Josh Bloom podcast, one being my biological father and another being an artistic father of sorts, Quentin Tarantino, whom I only refer to that way for the sake of stylistic expediency rather than the reality of being merely a mega fan of his work? How How was a boy of 4 years old and later 9 so enamored and influenced by the energy captured by 2 live Bob Seger records? If you want to pre-soundtrack the next part of this show, enjoy the cover of the Otis Clay song Trying to Live My Life Without You from 9 Tonight. The deeply soulful background vocals against Bob's call for Silver Bullet when he wants to summon the beefy horn section is just sick, sick, sick business. The first line of this song, written in 1972 by Eugene Williams, is, "I used to smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day. My dad used to smoke 4. That's 80 cigarettes. No wonder he dug this." I don't thank my father for much, but I do have to thank him for not only introducing me to these records, but also creating the opportunity to align the memories of them to an obsession with stereo equipment. Even though I could never afford to go in on it like I would have wanted to, like someone else could or just did, as I will explain, I never got over the lit-up glow of the VU meters on the tape deck, or the red lights of the graphic equalizer, or the jewel of my father's curated system, the now lost to time Accutrac 4000 turntable. I have included a photo of this fantastical machine in my Substack post. My father purchased this turntable when I was around 4 years old in 1976. This tracks, I know it's a pun, I can't help it, with the release date of the Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band Live Bullet album. I have thought about this piece of gear off and on over the years, mostly on, but only put together a deeper meaning about it recently. The name Accutrac 4000 sounds gimmicky, and my childhood memory of it is gimmicky too. Childhood memories in and of themselves are foggy fodder subject to the kind of blurry vision that accompanies flashbacks in films. Prior to the days of compact discs, this turntable could be programmed via buttons that lined the front panel to play the songs on a vinyl side in any order that you wanted to hear them. It even came with a demonstration record that instructed you to program the playback in the correct order to learn how to use the Accutrac 4000 correctly. Unsurprisingly, a link to this audio is available on YouTube. I linked to it in my Substack post. You know what I'm getting at. Watching this machine in motion was so magical. Of course, I wasn't allowed to touch it. I remember going with my father to the stereo store to buy this turntable. He also bought all of the expensive gear that you would expect the stereo salesman to sell him once the salesman realized my dad was already ready to drop a dime on the turntable. The stereo was installed on the living room wall of our house in Yorktown Heights, New York, just down the street from the open field where I used to fly kites. This field would eventually give way to the hottest shopping mall in the area, much to my parents' chagrin. They were part of the community organization that wanted to keep the mall from being built, but there I was at the age of 16 with a key to the Walden books. That mall still exists, but is now a shadow of its former self. The movie theater is gone, and the food court is straight garbage. You should always judge a mall by its food court. Fun fact that was literally fun, I made out in the back of a car by the entrance to the Dick's Sporting Goods at this mall in the summer of 2023. That was better than flying a kite. I remember his eyes darting around like one, though. Anyway, the stereo wall in my first childhood home, where I first experienced being a child who first felt all alone, was opposite the front windows, which featured 2 beautiful stained glass mosaics that hypnotized me on the daily. I have driven past this house, definitely on my way home from making out at the mall, and the stained glass isn't there anymore. I wonder where it is now. The stereo shelving was also glass, thick, with a green tint that I learned comes from iron oxide impurities in the raw materials. These were held up by shiny silver slats with matching silver arms. The sun shone through the front windows and reflected off the glass shelving, throwing light everywhere that was enhanced by the bits that made it through the stained glass mosaics. The Accutrac 4000 had its own dedicated wooden shelf that could have been the product of a custom woodworker. Breaking news. Here's an update on the brother, sister, girlfriend, boyfriend pair of dolts at the Black Cow community table, whom I spoke of on the last episode and earlier. They've been in my life so long now that they have likely either broken up or disowned each other, but as of this writing, they are still here at the Black Cow community table where I began telling you this stereo story. They are sharing their computer screens, interacting gregariously, and generally distracting me from my mission to create content to distract you. I am not the asshole here. They are. Remember, anyone who you think is an asshole always is, okay? But I must admit, as is my mantra, that I have made a nuisance of myself at this table in the past when visiting here with the old flame. He used to call this coffee shop the other coffee shop. He would say, "Can we go to the other coffee shop?" But our bad behavior was different. More about him another time. Back to Accutrac. The neurology of my young brain was so indelibly rewired by the sight of this stereo setup that I have thought about it ever since, and I have recently been thinking about the Accutrac 4000 a lot. The turntable has caused me to question my father's ethics. He's no longer alive to defend himself, and frankly, he was in his early 30s at the time, so I do not judge, but like a judge, I do like to at least look over the evidence. The basic financial information that follows is a setup for the basic bitch information about my father that follows the following. In 1976, around the time that this turntable was purchased, the retail price for the Accutrac 4000 was approximately $500. That doesn't exactly sound like audiophile level equipment, and it's not. Not then and not now. Except when you account for inflation, $500 in 1976 is $2,846.89 today. That is not record player from Walmart money. That is turntable from the stereo store money. I do not have nearly $3,000 to spend on a turntable, and considering what I am doing with my days these days, i.e. telling you this story, I likely never will. Now, here's the drama about my papa and my mama. I only realized when I started thinking about it recently that these extravagant purchases only began to enter our humble home around the time of the passing of my grandfather Herman on my mother's side. Herman was a dapper businessman who made a success of himself in printing and left behind a substantial net worth. Yes, I am insinuating that my parents misused the money they inherited, or more specifically, my father misused my mother's money that she inherited. The only way to understand when money is misused is by comparing the lifestyle you had to the lifestyle you ended up having to hide. There is so much more I can say, or maybe more accurately, much more evidence I can present in regard to this case, but I need to keep some content in the compartment. I will leave this story to be about the glory of the Accutrac 4000. Unlike my parents, stereo equipment isn't subject to speculation. It just is. The rest of this story is for another time, and a lengthier tome, now that all of the parties I might impugn are in the tomb. I will keep sharing tales of my journey since the womb. Oh, I forgot to explain how Quentin Tarantino figures into this. While the majority of my Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band fandom is wrapped up in his live records, it was the Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that fully introduced me to the studio version of the live bullet cut Ramblin' Gamblin' Man that originally appeared on the 1969 album of the same name by Bob's previous band, the Bob Seger System. Go and listen to this song 183 times. Speaking of Quentin, I now hate NYC. This is hyperbole, as is custom around here, but I want you to keep listening. It's not Quentin's fault. As I talked about previously, I spent a small amount of money, meaning Bank of America spent some money that they may never get back, to send myself to the city to see the recent re-release of Quentin Tarantino's 2 Kill Bill films, which have now been joined back together as originally intended. The title is Kill Bill: The Whole Bloody Affair. In planning this excursion, I thought that I would be a smart guy and get off the Metro North train from Peekskill at 125th Street instead of taking it into Grand Central at 42nd Street and then taking the subway back uptown to Lincoln Center, where I was ticketed to see the film. I should clarify, the film was not playing at the Lincoln Center cinemas, which do not famously feature mice and rats. It was playing at the AMC Lincoln Square, which just might. The day started off fine, even though I was still questioning whether I should pull this little stunt regarding jumping off someone else's train prematurely. That is a reference to the band The Cure. I hope you enjoyed that. Jumping jump cut, I did it. I got out at 125th Street in Harlem. Now, this decision was only about how I couldn't stomach the lack of logic in riding downtown to go back uptown, even though this is something I have done my entire life. But today, I was not going to be spending any time below 42nd Street before heading back uptown, so the decision seemed to be made for me. Unfortunately, in my hurry to hit the street, I didn't think much about where the station I was exiting from was actually located. It's on 125th Street, felt like enough. This haste came back to haunt me later, or more specifically, haunt my legs. After being ripped off by being forced to purchase a $10 Omni card when I only needed $5.80 to cover the 2 subway rides, I grabbed lunch at Xi'an Famous Foods and cookies at Leven Bakery. Then I spent some time writing and making videos in a ridiculously overpriced juice shop near the movie theater, where I purchased only a small black coffee like a frugal good boy splurging on Daddy Bank of America's dime before heading to the theater. A dude sat down next to me at the AMC with an entire pizza in his lap. I wanted to ask for some, but remembered the rats and also remembered that you don't do that. The reassembled Kill Bill film is over 4 hours long, and even though I was enjoying myself, towards the middle of the 3rd hour, I felt like I had enjoyed myself enough and began longing for home. I anticipated this and bought an aisle seat, and so when I had had enough of a good time, it only felt awkward for a second when I got up to leave. I wasn't going to make it home until way past my bedtime of 6 p.m., so I might as well get a move on. I make it a rule to not overdo joy. When I got outside, it was already dark. I got back on the subway and got out at 125th Street, and it was then that I realized that I was experiencing an experience that is familiar to anyone coming out of the subway in an unfamiliar part of the city. I didn't know which way I was facing. Another experience that is familiar to anyone coming out of the subway in an unfamiliar part of the city is that you don't want to reveal that you don't know where you are. Asking, "Do you know which way the Metro North station is basically the same as saying, "Can you mug and murder me?" I mean, that is not true even in Harlem, but cliches are common in today's propaganda-filled America. As someone who lived in NYC for a total of 12 years, in addition to my many years as a daily commuter and visitor, I wouldn't let my pride, my cool, my know-it-all attitude be undermined by asking any questions. I later found out that the answer wasn't so readily available anyway. Think about it. Why would residents of Harlem know where the Metro North station is? They live here. They're not going to Westchester, for Christ's sake. And so, as you can imagine, I spent the next 2 hours walking back and forth on 125th Street. I'm talking all the way west to the Hudson River at 12th Avenue and almost as far to the east. You are probably saying, "Josh, why didn't you just look it up on your phone?" Well, hey, you're smarter than me, because not only did I use my phone to make content earlier in the day, but I didn't bring my backup charger, the charger that is always in my bag, but was not in my bag because I took it out the night before to charge it up and then left it on the kitchen table. If you are rolling your eyes right now, you should. I did. So, again, as you can imagine, my phone died, which also means I would not have the power to be able to display my ticket if I ever did find the train. Eventually, I passed by a cell phone store that I had passed by a couple of times already, which was about to close, and walked in and asked if I could unplug a display model and charge my phone. The dude behind the counter said, "I have a fast charger," and reached his hand out. I was immediately thrust into a social situation, which I dealt with by discussing how old the model of my phone was, how I hate the process of switching to a new phone, and how cumbersome it is to transfer files, reinstall apps, and reset settings. I kept up this facade until the charge got to 9%. That's what I'm good for. I can hold a conversation for the amount of time it takes to fast charge a phone to 9%. I had a good vibe with this dude and decided to pop the question. "Do you know which direction the Metro North station is?" He did not, and he wasn't lying. He reacted as if Metro North Station was something I made up. In fact, I felt like maybe the trust I had built with him was broken at this moment. I enjoyed our chat nonetheless and obviously remember it fondly, but unfortunately my night was not nearly over. I never started to panic, but I did start to say to myself, maybe the train station doesn't exist. But eventually, I found it, like a mirage in a disgusting desert. The train arrived, or should I say, a train arrived, because in my fatigue and exasperation, I got on the wrong one. I got on the express instead of the local, which means it doesn't stop in Peekskill. I would have to switch to the local at the end of the line, which seemed plausible to do at the time. Sure. I had just enough power to show the conductor my ticket, and he informed me of what I already knew, which was that the train would not be continuing to my station. When I arrived at this train's final destination, it was snowing outside. The trackside sign said that the train I needed next would arrive in a little over an hour. Have you ever been in such a state of "I can't believe this is happening" that you suddenly realize why it's happening? It's because you have been cursed for life. I wasn't going to sit in the cold and snow for an hour at 10 p.m. after having left the house at 10 a.m. and so decided to see if I could grab a cab to take me the 10 miles or so to the Peekskill station where I had parked my car in much happier times. I tried to not seem desperate as I negotiated a $23 fee down to $20, both of which I did not have, theoretically, actually, and most importantly, physically, since the cab driver informed me that he only took cash. He did offer to take me to an ATM, one I have used before in a town that I spend a lot of time in when the sun is out. "Here you go," I said as I handed him the $20 bill, while realizing I had not seen a $20 bill since my brother tried to give me the one that I stuffed into the Panera tip jar. We set out in what was now an increasingly treacherous snowstorm. I remained quiet, not only because I could not deal with more socializing, but because I had admitted defeat. Not to the universe or the circumstances, but to myself, a person who once took pride in his ability to plan and today had failed. You have been listening to the Josh Bloom Podcast. I want to remind you that my book about the iconic psych pop band and co-founders of the mythologized Elephant Six Collective, The Apples in Stereo, titled The Apples in Stereo, was published last month by J-Card Press. You can purchase a physical copy from your bookseller of choice at applesbook.com. An electronic edition is available as well. NPR's Into Music podcast says it defies classification and makes us rethink the rock book. Mark Masters, writer for Rolling Stone, The Washington Post, and Pitchfork, among others, calls it a uniquely compelling view of a uniquely compelling band. And Chad Stockfleth, the director of the Elephant Six Recording Company documentary, claims, "The mythology of the Elephant Six Collective has a way of obscuring some details. Josh isn't afraid to go mining in the shadowy crevices of the mountain." Well, thank you, Chad, but based on my experiences on 125th Street, I really shouldn't go mining in any mountains, quite frankly. I have included links to 3 recent podcast interviews with me about the book in the show notes. Again, if you would like to see my latest 90-plus minute Come With Me to See video containing sibling drama, sausage McMuffin drama, and my watch-along review of Spike Lee's latest drama, Highest to Lowest, based on the Akira Kurosawa drama High and Low, a link to watch over at YouTube is also in the show notes. Please subscribe to my Substack and you will be the first to know when I post new episodes of this podcast, as well as the upcoming editions of Josh Bloom's Right on Time recaps and Come With Me to See videos about the classic adventure film from my childhood, The Goonies, and the latest Paul Thomas Anderson film, One Battle After Another. I will also be doing a reading of a chapter or maybe 2 from my recently published book about the apples in stereo. Don't miss it. Subscribe. Go to superjews.substack.com and don't forget to follow me on all of my social media. Find the links at IamJoshBloom.com. Just so you know, on the last episode, I described how I acted like a good Samaritan. I am not trying to turn this into a regular segment, but I did it again. I just told you about the snowstorm I traveled home in after my trip to the city. Well, the next morning, I ventured out to clean the snow off my car and get started with my day, and on my way, I saw my 70-something neighbor lying in the bushes. He had fallen down, and when I tried to help him up, it was clear quite quickly that he wasn't going to be able to get back on his feet. He didn't appear injured, and he was talkative, but I did see an unopened bottle of Moscato propped up in the snow beside him. My dude just wanted to do some day drinking, and now it was all this. I called 911 and waited until they arrived, at which time he refused to go to the hospital, even though we all insisted he should, and so the EMTs helped him and his bottle of hooch into the house. I was proud of my heroism, or to be real, the closest I have come to heroism in recent memory. This is to say, as usual, if you want to express your gratitude for everything I do for the senior community, which clearly is a lot, you can do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app, and leave a comment saying that the show has changed your life permanently. You can say it was for the good or for the bad. Either is fine with me. Please also tell a friend about the show. It is the best way to spread the word. You could say something like, hey, you have parents or grandparents, right? I listen to this guy named Josh Bloom who is willing to stand around in the snow to wait for the ambulance and fire department to arrive and carry his neighbor and his neighbor's bottle of wine into the house. I have a feeling that your friend, and more importantly, your friend's parents and possibly grandparents, will be grateful. We have reached the end of the show, but does the show ever really end? I'll see you next time.